I think that's a fair assessment. Let's go ahead and bring in our good friend from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, Dylan Sinn. Dylan,
Hey
how you doing
guys.
today?
Good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me on.
Doing good. Just talking a little bit of Big Ten football. Obviously,
Sure.
realignment has been one of the biggest discussions over the past a couple of weeks. But we're also, I know you've been visiting both Indiana and Purdue football practices, and probably a little bit of Notre Dame as well.
Sure.
Where do you want to start? Let's start with a little bit of Indiana, since this is typically what we talk about. What are
Okay.
kind of your impressions on where Tom Allen has his team right now as they get ready for the fall?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest impressions that we've gotten, and we talked about this a little bit with Tom Allen yesterday, was that Dexter Williams is a little bit further along in his injury recovery than I think people expected. So obviously the quarterback competition this offseason has been Taven Jackson and Brendan Sorsby, two redshirt freshmen that haven't started a game for IU yet.
Yep.
And one of them will start week one. But Dexter Williams, who started the end of last season that everyone seemed to think was playing very well, is further along in his recovery from his knee injury than people thought. Tom Allen has said previously that it would be mid-season before he'd be back. He said yesterday that it could be a game or two before that. If all continues to go well, he's doing better than even he thought. So that's good to hear for IU. And then beyond that, the impression that I've gotten is that the offensive line is a little more cohesive this year than it was last year. I think that Bob Bostad has come in. The players respect him. They like him. IU has 4 starters back from last year, including Matthew Bedford, who did not play after the first game because he tore his ACL. So you might see a little bit better line play for IU than you did last year, which would be huge for this team.
Yeah, and that's kind of, and I'll hand it to you in a second, Dustin. I feel like that's something Dustin and I were discussing earlier too. The offensive line, and Kevin Wilson used to always emphasize this as well. If you can have a competent offensive line, that gives you such a big advantage that you don't even realize how important it is until you don't have it. And so if Indiana really is able to take the next steps forward in the offensive line department, I mean, the sky's definitely not the limit for Indiana, but they're definitely going to be able to have their way more often than not when it comes to their offense.
Yeah, I think that the skill position players are really good, and I think IU has really good running backs. I think they have really good wide receivers kind of across the board that are going to be able to make plays for whoever the quarterback is if you can protect the quarterback even a little bit, right? Like last year, they were not able to do that. They were really poor in run blocking and in pass blocking, which is not a combination that you want. And part of it was because they didn't have a lot of continuity, right? When Bedford got hurt in the first game, basically they had to reshuffle everything, and they kind of had to reshuffle everything repeatedly the rest of the season because of that, kind of threw everything into chaos. Now he's back. He said he's been healthy since basically summer workouts. So that's huge for them. He's a guy who started for them for 4 years, all Big Ten guy in 2021. And they expected big things from him last year. But it's also the mindset on the line, right? We talked to a bunch of them, and they know that they were kind of perceived as the weak link last year, whether fair or not. I think a lot of it was fair. They were the one that had their position coach get removed in the middle of the season. And they're kind of focused on making sure that doesn't happen again, which is huge for this team.
And we're talking with Dylan Sinn of the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Dylan, I think one of the things that makes your position unique, as you put a lot of miles on your car to travel to different practices,
Sure.
is that I think when you have beat reporters, beat writers who cover specifically one team, I think it's easy to kind of get lost in the idea that, well, this team looks really good because you're only seeing them against that team. You've had an opportunity to see multiple fall camps, multiple teams in practice. Where would you say Indiana is maybe along those offensive line? Because I do think that's the biggest issue compared to maybe Purdue and Notre Dame. Like, is there significant improvement on there? Like, or how does it compare to Purdue and Notre Dame? And I know that's a tough question to answer,
Sure.
But is it at least comparable, do you think?
I think it's at least comparable to Purdue. I think Notre Dame obviously has one of the best offensive lines in the country and will continue to do so this year. I will say that for all the NFL draft heads out there, Joe Alt, the left tackle at Notre Dame, is considered to be a potential top 5 pick in next year's draft, maybe the first non-quarterback off the board. And boy, does he live up to that. He is a monster. He's really, really good. By the way, so is Benjamin Morrison, the Notre Dame cornerback, who will be a first-round pick in 2024. He's only a sophomore. I booked that right now. That dude is awesome. But no, I think IU is still, it's comparable to Purdue, but Purdue has a pretty good line itself, right? There's some returning guys there that they like. They obviously losing Eric Miller and Spencer Holsteg, who were starters last year, to transfer was tough, especially losing Miller to Louisville after spring practice. That's not what you want. But they do have Marcus Embo, the freshman All-American last year at left guard. He might be moving to tackle this year. It's kind of unclear. So they have some, I think the way to put it is that Purdue has more questions, but they also have more talent on the line. I think IU has more continuity, but they're not like the guys that they have back have not been quite as good in the past. So it's a question of what you want, right? It's do you want continuity or do you want guys that have proven that they can play with some more questions?
Speaking of Purdue, obviously they're going to have a brand new head coach with Ryan Walters, formerly of Illinois. Where do you think expectations should be set for him with what he has inherited from Jeff Brom's, former roster? Do you think that, obviously it won't be the exact same style of team, but do you think that they can at least come close to replicating that kind of success? And I don't mean that they're going to win the West Division, but can they be competitive?
I think they can. I think there's been some talk about, they're going to go 5-7 or they're going to go 4-8. It's going to be a tough first year. I don't really know if that's true. I don't expect them to win the West again. I think last year was kind of a confluence of, not only Purdue having a very good season, but Wisconsin being down. I don't expect that to be the case again. I kind of expect Wisconsin to walk this year, honestly. But I do think Purdue will be competitive. I would expect a bowl game in Ryan Walters' first year. They did lose a lot of talent. That is true. They lost Charlie Jones. They lost Payne Durham. They lost Aiden O'Connell. That's almost all of your passing game right there. But they really like Hudson Card. I keep telling people that they are really, really high on Hudson Card. Not only in the passing game, but in the running game. They keep saying that he's hitting home runs in practice in the run game, which is interesting. And then the problem is the receivers, right? I don't know how many guys they have that are actually going to be able to catch the ball on a regular basis. They have a lot of guys who have played for them before, and none of them have really been significant contributors before. And then they brought in a guy from Florida Atlantic named Jamal Adreen, who was really good for Florida Atlantic as a freshman last year, obviously deserved to step up to Power 5. Now, the problem with him is that he just tore his ACL and is out for the season. So that's a big blow. That's a guy they were counting on to really kind of give them a deep threat right away as some of these other guys step into bigger roles. He was the only one that had been a primary target in the past. And so that's going to be a significant detriment for them, and it might take the passing game a little bit longer to come along. Now, the running game should be fine, right? Devin Mockabee is a very, very good runner. I think they like him a lot. Tyrone Tracy, who's been a wide receiver last year, has moved to running back. They like him a lot, kind of a thunder and lightning combination there. So I like what they're doing on offense. The defense, it's kind of more of a question mark. They have some guys back. Cam Allen, the safety, is a guy who's been all Big Ten in the past. Very, very solid. Nick Carraway, who has changed his last name, and I'm so sorry to Nick Carraway. I don't remember what he has changed his name to. I have changed his last name, but he is a monster off the edge. They really, really like him. So he's the perfect type of player for Ryan Walters' defense, right? He's a guy that's just going to create havoc up front. And then you hope that Walters' defense can be a little bit, basically give you an advantage in that area, kind of help your talent level play up. So I would expect them to win some games they're not supposed to win. You have a really interesting start to the season with Fresno State, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, 3 teams that we like Purdue, we don't know what to expect from. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get through that stretch 3-0, which is not off the table at all. I think that they could be in for a good season.